Hello everybody, this is Dave Wallace coming to you from my backyard in Wahiawa, Hawaii. I have a question. How many of you are afraid of theaters? Sitting in theaters? Being in theaters alone? Okay? Now, I grew up on the island of Molokai, and for a small island like Molokai, we had four theaters. One was located in Mauna Loa town on the west end of Molokai. The other one was in central Molokai in the town called Kualapu. That one was real close to where we lived in Holehua. So um, that was the theater that we frequented the most. The other two theaters were in Kaunakakai. One was Kamui, and that one was a tall wooden frame building, and was pretty tall building. One of the taller buildings on Molokai at the time. And the last theater was a real interesting theater called um, Ka, Kukui, the Kukui Theater. Okay, and Kukui Theater was owned by a family, and one of the sons was my classmate later on in high school. But anyway, this theater was very unusual. It was like a drive-in without cars. It was an open air theater. It reminded me a lot of the Wailai drive-in, where there was a big screen, fence around, and chairs, and the flooring, the ground cover for Kukui was crushed rock. So there's a lot of rocks and stones and stuff. And the interesting thing about this theater, Kukui, is if you're watching a film and the weather would turn bad, like rain and storm, they stop the film, give you a ticket, and say, come back another day when the weather is better so that you can finish watching the rest of the film. And that was an interesting thing about that particular theater. Now, in the two theaters that I mentioned, Kualapu and Kukui, there are strange things that happen in both theaters. And when you live in a small island like this, and for these theaters had regular attendees. Okay, um, a lot of the people that went to the Kualapu Theater were Filipino workmen. They were single men. A lot of them went to the theater to watch movies, take up time, and a lot of them and stuff would just habitually go and they'd sit in the same place. So, and the same thing in Kukui. There's always a regular set of crowd, people sitting in different places, and it seemed like an unspoken rule. Now, um, because we went to the Kualapu Theater a lot as a kid, I got to know just by looking and glancing who was there and who wasn't, and among the regulars. And there's this one Filipino man. He was really friendly, very polite, good natured, and he sat in a back row. And in Kuala Lumpur, the theater, the back section was an elevated, kind of like a platform, and they call it reserved seating, basically. But it's the best seats in the house because it was elevated and inclined, so you didn't have to sit behind someone and kind of like look through somebody's head to watch the movies. So a lot of the regulars would sit in this place. Anyway, this one Filipino man, he liked to smoke. He always had cigarettes, something to smoke, and he would eat peanuts, and there would be peanut shells all along the floor. My dad knew who this person was, and apparently they were friends. So after years of going to theater, and this man would sit on the third row on the first seat right on the corner of this elevated platform, And sometimes when I'd pass and he'd see me, I'd turn and look at him, smile, and just sort of nod, and he'd nod back and smile, and ni haole, he'd have a lot of missing teeth, and but he was real jovial, really pleasant man. So I always looked to see if he was there and to make sure he was okay. And one evening, we went to the movies, and when I walked past this place, I looked for the man, and he was gone. And so at the end of the movie, I went home, talked to my dad. I said, "Hey, what happened to Tata? He wasn't at the movie tonight." And my dad says, "Oh, yeah, Tata passed away a couple weeks ago." So, oh no. So, poor thing. And so we went back to the movie several times after that. And a couple months later, I went to the movies, sat down with my friends, and the movies was going on. The previews were going on. So I decided to grab a soda and some potato chips and stuff. Good thing about back then and stuff, you could go to the theater with 50 cents, and you could pay your admission. You could get a bottle of soda and a drink and candy, and you come home with extra change. So uh, anyway, I went to buy my snacks, and I got loaded up, and I started walking back to my seat. And just when I passed where this man normally sits, I took a glance into the seat, and there was a man sitting over there, really unusual. And so I stopped and I looked, and as soon as I stopped and looked, the person put a cigarette in his mouth and lit a match and put it to his cigarette. And right when he put the match next to his face, it illuminated his face, and he looked at me, and he smiled. He kind of like took out the cigarette and smiled, and I could see him. It was a man that had passed away. So I looked, and I made a beeline to my friends, and I sat down there, and I was all scared, and my friend says, "Hey, you okay?" "Oh, not really." Says, "Why?" Says, "Oh, you know the Filipino man, the Tata back there? Yeah. He's supposed to be dead, yeah?" "Yeah." Um, he's not. He's in the seat." My friends all went and go check him out, and they come back, they go, "Dare you lie!" He was not there. So at the end of the movie, I went back, I went home and talked to my dad and say, "Hey, Tata, the man that sits and smokes cigarette in a theater." I said, "Yeah, I saw him tonight." And my dad kind of like smiled. He says, "Yeah, I saw him too." So both of us saw the same man, enjoying the movie. Now here on Oahu, the scariest theater that I visited was the Dole Cannery Theater. And the specific theaters, when you enter Dole, there are two sections of theaters. One on the right, that's closest to City Mill, I guess, and then the one on the left. The theaters that I witnessed some things in there were the ones on the right. And I took one of my dates, and this is going back many years ago, but I took one of my dates on a movie to Dole Cannery. And when we walked into the theater, and this is the theater, the third theater on the right hand side. So I walked in, and the movie had started already because my date had spent extra time making her hair, making herself look pretty. So we were late, and the movie had already started. So I was trying to find seats, and I came to a row where I normally like to sit, and it's right around the middle rows. And I turned, and there were two people sitting in the chairs, a man in the aisle and a woman inside. So, but there's empty chairs in front of them, and the theater was pretty full. There's quite a bit of people there, so I wanted to get inside. So I bent over and I talked to the man sitting right on the aisle seat, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, can I get past you?" And he just sat there looking at the screen and eating popcorn and ignoring me completely. So I look at my date, and my date going, What's going on?" And so I bent over and I talked to the man, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, can we get past you?" And again, he's sitting there staring at the screen and eating popcorn. And that's all he's doing. So I turned to my date, and she says, she looks at me, "Aren't you going to go sit down?" I says, "Well, I'm trying to get past these two people." And she comes by me and looks inside by the chairs, and she looks at me and says, "Dave, what people? There's nobody there." So I look back at these guys and stuff, and I realize that they're spirits watching the film. Okay? And so um, I decided to just walk through them. And my date couldn't see them, but I could. Okay? So I let her walk in first, and then I came in second, and I was sitting next to this other spirit. Eventually, the longer I sat there, they kind of like faded away. But those are my experiences with theaters and people who are caught in a cycle of doing the same thing out of habit. Look like these people were moviegoers and caught up in a cycle where they kept on going back to the movies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these stories, and if you enjoyed the stories, please subscribe and share. And this is Dave Wallace saying mahalo, and catch you folks next time. Tonight I'm going to be posting the numbers for the Mega Million, which is tomorrow. And the Mega Million is on the larger side, is 30 plus $1 million. So that's a good opportunity for some of you. Okay, so I catch you folks later. Aloha.